Hello. All right. Right, we are live on Facebook. Welcome. So it's coloured glass in pastel. Ooh. You like pastel, don't you?
Pastel,
And have you done pastel?
I've done it, but I find it hard.
Yeah.
I've done pastel before, not here.
And you've
but I've
done a little bit.
I've done a bit.
I often end up wearing more than I put on.
So there's
And
nothing.
then scratch your face and you end up with coloured face and all of that. But actually, doing coloured glass is much easier in pastel than in any other medium. Because as long as you've got your background, and this is what we call craft card or craft card, depending where you're from. Craft card. You're all craft card in the room, aren't you? Do you say craft or craft?
Craft.
You'd say craft.
Just from round here.
Yeah. Muy duck.
Yeah.
Craft. You say craft. So it's not pastel paper, but you can. I mean, there's so many different ones. But I'm doing a lot of smudging, so I don't really want the gritty stuff like pastel matte and stuff like that because it's too textured for your fingers. Morning, Jackie. Morning, Tony. Not our Tony. My nephew, Tony. Well, I say my nephew, but he makes me feel really old because he's like a whole adult in his own self, you see. And I'm still very young.
You thought I could be your mother, so.
Most.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So I know how it feels now. I actually have some students that come to classes that I'm old enough to be their parent. So it's revenge. Oh, that's not old anymore.
I'm old enough to be my son's girlfriend's grandmother.
That's scary.
That's really scary, isn't it?
Right. So we're going to do layering, and if you've got several layers of glass, you're going to have to start with the background one and work forward because because it's transparent, each layer is going to have to be done as a layer. So you do your background, the next one, the midground, the foreground, because you can see through it all. I'm not going to sketch it out first. This is, oh dear, why do I do this to myself? Why? And the photograph I've chosen is just a reference photograph I found, and it won't look anything like it. So at the top of the bottle is missing off. So it's bottle and 3 different types of glass.
Is that pastel pencil?
It's pastel pencil. This is Carbothello pastel pencil by Stabilo. They're a little bit softer than the Derwent ones. I mean, we sell both downstairs, but I find the Carbothello a little bit easier to work with. It's hard to get your shoulders right.
How did you pronounce that?
What's that? Stabilo or Stabilo.
I always say Stabilo.
Yeah, I've always called it Stabilo, but then that doesn't necessarily mean that it's correct. But Carbothello by Stabilo. They do have have you used these ones?
I've got a favourite ones, and I've got a few of those ones because I bought them separate.
Yeah, they're just a little bit nicer to work with, but I use them. In fact, that pastel portrait on the wall was done purely in those. Yeah, that was a full day class we did, where we used the greens underneath and then put flesh on the top. It's quite fun. So I'm just sketching out with that pencil, and then
I've got some pastel pencils, but they're quite scratchy.
These are much softer to work with. Much softer. So let me come in with a bit of an end there. And then I'll just smudge. Often I will run out of fingers. That's the trouble.
you can use anything but your fingers, can you?
I mean, you can use cotton buds,
Yeah.
but the issue with that is that you can't feel it.
No.
You know what I mean? You don't know how much pressure you're putting on and all of that kind of thing. But I always use my fingers to sort of like soften it and push the pastel in. Now, there is a bit of blue as well. Morning, Emily. With a little bit of a gap. I mean, this would stand out more on black paper. But, hello. So this would stand out more on black paper. But the camera gets a bit too excited with black. Make a nice effect on your fingers as well, actually.
The only problem is with pastel when you're doing an actual sort of line,
Yes.
as opposed to, scales,
Yeah.
is when you make a mistake, it's getting rid of it.
Yes.
That can be difficult.
That is the putty rubbers, the really soft putty rubbers, like a bit of yellow now, are useful. Because as long as you haven't really worked it into the surface, the putty rubbers can just lift off the colour rather than do anything with it. So the softer the putty rubber, the more you can just dab at it, whereas any other eraser doesn't quite work.
The
So
pencil sort of rubber, like a
Yeah.
pencil with a brush on it, they're not bad.
no, because you can use the stiff bristle to rub it off first. But because I've pushed that down, it's harder to remove, but not impossible for me to get a softer line and get rid of it. But often I will just use the morning, Mary. I will just use a colour similar to the colour of the background, so I can sketch it out first. If I was doing a full-blown thing, otherwise it gets a little bit scary. Now you see I've been naughty. I've done the whole glass like that, and there should be another glass in front of it which distorts it slightly, so I'm going to have to sort of distort it even more, because there's a green glass first. Let's get it in the right sequence. So I'll do this a little bit darker to start with, and I'll remember this time to just paint the bits. So you paint with pastels, by the way, you don't draw. So you draw with charcoal, but you paint with pastels, and it's to do with the pigments.
And draw with chalk.
You draw with chalk, yeah. Even though chalk and pastels are the same, but I think chalk's got more of an inferior feel. It's more. So pastel is using the same pigment as you've got in paint, so it stands to reason that you paint with pastels rather than draw. Let's go a little bit more. I want to. Oh, that's a better colour. Let's go. I was just saying before you came in that I've run out of fingers very quickly. So if I leave that gap and then do it's a sort of red one, let me follow that line through just a little bit. So I want it quite pale, so I'll just drag it through. So it'll just show up a fraction. I think the hardest thing really is to get the measurements so it works and looks sort of. I'm going to have to go a bit lower down there because of the we've done it. You've done this one, haven't you? Yeah, we've done coloured bottles, but I think we've done this exact image, but on black in Great Bolton. A bit broader there. Morning, Grace. See, technically that line should distort a fraction and it'll go in more of a red colour there. Come out a fraction like that. We'll go a little bit more orange. So it is quite cool that you can just cover up your lines so it doesn't stand out if you go a little bit wrong, because obviously I did this on purpose.
Yeah.
When you teach art, you can say that, and most times people believe you. No, they don't. They never
No, you're
believe
too
you.
long for that, Barry.
Yeah.
Take it all with a
And then it comes back to that one. So I'll be putting the highlights in. I'm going to get a wet wipe. Getting far too carried away. I'm running out of pens to wipe the other bits on. Always wet wipes available. Right. And then we've got a nice blue. One more glass. And then I can put the highlights and stuff. Yeah, I think this is an ultramarine. But the thing is with a lot of pastel pencils as well, is that they don't always have the same names as their paints. And it will vary from different companies, so hopefully that a sort of Derwent one will, you know what, let's bring that down a bit lower, and that down a bit lower there. You've got a little bit more flexibility with pastel, and you can build up the colours much more than you probably think you can, because you can build up the layers. Now, depending on the surface that you use, there are only so many layers that the pastels will let you build up before they stop sticking. So you've got a few layers, but because I'm pushing it in, you're all right. But if you just let it sit on the top, the more layers you put on, there's nothing for the pastel to hold on to. So if you think about it, you've got, with the texture, you need the texture to help the pastels sit there. If the pastels haven't got anything to sit on, then it's a real struggle for the pastels to work quite well. I'm just going to make that a little bit wider there. A little bit wider there. A little bit more yellow. Now I might start, once the colour stays on, I might add a bit of black to just make it look a bit more solid as well as the lighter background. Ooh. Just fling that about. Because you want it, with glass, you want it to feel solid, but you also want it to feel delicate and transparent. So you don't want to put the tops through like solid lines, because that...
Your eye sort of fills it in anyway.
Absolutely, yeah, it does. The eye will give you the illusion. Yes, that's got to come there. That's a better shape. Don't want that bit. Let's get the rubber on that bit. Because of it being red glass, but you do have to define your edges far more. You see, it takes it away quite easily. So it gives you, you want solid lines. Check anybody saying anything. No, that's good. They might be speaking to me on there, but I can't see, so I do apologise, Facebook people, if you're trying to have a conversation. The sticks I'm using are Mungyo half sticks, and the sets are actually quite good. I find, because I'm not hugely creating tons of pastel paintings on a regular basis, the half sticks last me quite some time, and I can I get a wider variety of colours with the half sticks. So I think a 38 set is about £16, something like that, which isn't bad. They're nice, strong, vibrant colours, and they're a really good way to sort of start up. And
you've got a really nice selection of colours there.
You have. I think this is a 64 set, which is about 25 quid, which still isn't a huge amount of money, really, in the realms of paint or pastels. So I'm going to go a little bit darker in there. Go a little bit darker in here. Now there is a hint of red reflected, because you've got so many different reflections to think of with glass. So I might turn this into a black background, which will bring the colours more forward. If I was doing this in real life,
Where are we now then, Barry?
I mean, for me,
This is not real life.
this is not real life. I would be using black paper, but I've had to steer away from the black because of the camera initially. time? What time is it?
25 past 1.
Oh, that's cool. Black pastel is lovely to work with, even if you're a bit messy.
What's that, deliberate?
Is what deliberate? What?
On the red glass.
That bit?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always end up smudging mine with my hand as I'm doing something like that.
You've got a bit.
Just got to take your hand off the paper and then.
Yeah. It is. Keep your hand off the paper. Or get a sheet of printer paper or something and have it over the top. How's the camera coping? Oh, it's coping better than I thought now. That's good. What's that?
You always use black paper, wouldn't you?
I would. But it's a good way of showing that you can build up your colours.
Yeah.
So if you go, oh, I've got it wrong or whatever, that's fine, because you can colour over it, look. And then I can go back in with the pastels again. So let's go over it. Let me go over some colour deliberately. Over that bit, look. And maybe, oh, look at my finger now. Let's go over that bit.
You're just getting carried away now, aren't you?
Yeah. I enjoy it. Look, let's go over all of it. Let's go over this. Look.
Let's rub it all out.
How long you got?
We're fine. It's all fine. But I can see where I've been. Right, so that will give me enough of information now to go back in with the colour to show you. When I do these things, I do think,
I hope this works.
I hope this works this time.
This is right.
There's a lot of pressure. And I forget the pressure until I do it.
Actually, something like glasses and bottles get more equal, isn't it, on this each side?
Yeah, when I set the demos up and stuff, and I'm looking at, well, what should I do this time, you know, when I do the next sheets, which are out in a few weeks, September, the next lot of classes. I know, scary. So too many layers and it won't work. If you've got enough layers, it will work. So you can see, if you with a bit of pressure, you can still get strong colour from it. But I'm not going to totally smudge in, because it might go a bit too dark. No, one black. Can you see how blacks are different colours? Can you see how that comes out a totally different shade? So even though it's black, sometimes they're called neutral blacks, and a neutral black gives you a totally different colour. I should have just gone with black paper. But it's the contrast that's really important. Broke that. I'm having one of those days today, aren't I? And I've got run out of clean hands. Back in the black. There's a lot of different layers, you see. But on black paper, it stands out more. Now, if I go across with that one, like that, that will give me that bit. Get another wet wipe. Or a bath. A bath. Shower. Get in the shower.
Get in the shower.
Don't say that. I do.
A bath.
I don't know.
In the shower.
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 Yeah, shower.
Shower.
He's emphasising it too much.
I do apologise.
Yes, I think so.
I'll speak properly from now on, shall I? RP English and all of that. Okay, so we need some white. Ooh. Sorry, live Facebook, I've just made you seasick. Now what you'll see is if I have too many layers on, the white won't show up.
Okay.
So how well will I have messed up today? With certain pastel pencils, you'll find that the pencils won't work as well. Can you hear that squeak?
Yeah.
Because you've got a lot of layers to go through, so it's harder for the pencils to work, and that's sometimes why people don't like charcoal, because of that squeaky sound that you get. There's not a huge lot you can do about with charcoal. There's not, so look at my hands now. There's not a huge amount you can do, because charcoal is what charcoal is. But with pastel pencils, if it is a bit squeaky, you can rectify it and go in with a soft pastel. If I show you the difference, there's a bit of green there as well.
So when you're doing that with that white, is that picking up the colour onto the end of the pencil?
It is. It's picking up the colour on the end of the pencil. It's not ideal that it does that. Where have I put my other wet white? It's not ideal that it does that. But it's going to act more as a blender, and it will tone the colours down. I mean, you can see there, look, that it's picked up blue and black and all of that kind of stuff. Whereas with a block of pastel, a chalk pastel, it gives a more definite look. So that's just smudging. If I go in with the white on its own, because it's softer, it sits on the top more. But what I want to achieve is hard edges, so it feels more solid. The highlights.
Yeah.
It makes it feel more transparent and more reflective. And a lot of the time, I don't know if you remember the demo I did on painting metallics in watercolour. It was a while ago. What will happen is that sometimes you have to forget what it is and just totally think of what shapes are being made from it, because the actual object is irrelevant, because it's the shape that makes the object. So for this, I'm looking at what shape is the glass making, and there is a bit of reflection in some of this, and this edge is white. There's a little bit of white on this one. I always keep my pastels in the set, but I know some people like to have them loose, which is fine. But if you have them loose in a jar, you're best off having them in rice.
This is a very soft one.
Yeah, keeps them clean.
No, I don't have
Yeah, it makes for interesting curry. Paper stumps work really well as well. Have I got one spare?
Oh, those grey things.
Yeah,
You're supposed to use some emery peg to sharpen, don't they? You know, to get the...
Yeah, what on these?
Yeah.
I use a knife.
I love my finger.
Yeah, exactly.
But it just helps sort of define lines.
These things that, like, the end of a, you know, the handle on a paintbrush.
Yes.
Where the bristles will be, it's like little different shapes of rubber.
Yes. Oh yeah. Colour shapers.
Yeah, they're quite handy.
They are. They're brilliant. Where these work nicely is that you can sometimes put more pressure on than you can with your finger. So all it is...
What is that? Is it smudging it, or is it...
Yeah, it sort of smudges it and blends it a little bit. Takes off any excess and keeps the edges nice and crisp. And because it's got a point, you can get in slightly better shapes than with your finger, unless you've got a really good angled finger. Because if I put too many layers on, the pastel's just going to fall off. Neaten the edges, and there's this darker bit. But what's quite cool is you can pick up some of the colour and transfer it. Really push it in. You see how it sort of changed the edges a little bit more. A bit of white there. So a little bit more. Green there, and then with this. You want to add a little bit of reflection. And it's... Oh, look at my bag. Yeah. When can I retire?
Far too young. So...
No, what were you going to say?
You know what you always talk about getting things so they look grounded?
Yes. Grounded.
Well, you know,
Yeah,
so they're not
attached,
floating.
yes.
Yeah.
That's what the reflection will do,
Yeah.
hopefully. If I've got a dry hand, a clean dry finger. But when you've got such a solid background anyway that's got the contrast in, it's often that it will look like it's floating.
Yeah.
You'd have to really give it a hint of another background colour, which doesn't always work. Sometimes the more dramatic it is, the better.
It's starting to look shiny.
Yeah, and it's the white that does that. So if I put an extra bit of white, what is hard is making sure you've got an edge. Edges are tricky to come by in pastels.
Especially the round ones, aren't they?
Yeah.
It's they're good pastels. The Rembrandt pastels are a bit edgier, aren't they?
Yeah.
A bit harder.
Yeah, they're slightly harder, and you've got the Sennelier pastels are lovely and soft, and they'll sit on anything. But again, if you've got a harder pastel, it doesn't always fit. But a softer pastel will sit on the top, which is why your pastel pencils will often squeak, because they're just working their way through the layers rather than actually doing what they're supposed to do. Got a bit of a shine now. But in an ideal world, black paper to start with, since I'm working on black, would have made a difference straight away. But it just means you've got to build it up a little bit more and a little bit more. But this one, you see, is through the glass, so I want that softer. Morning, Liz. So it's more, actually, if I put a bit of orange in that. I had to check which was my clean finger and which was my rubbing finger. So you can see, even if you do mess up, you can still bring things back from the brink. To create the feel. An illusion of glass. But it is kind of a dramatic look. I'll show you another quick way as well, if I can find a spare hand. Yes, the clock's fast, so we're all right. Right, so let's move that out of the way. A quick way, if you wanted just to practice. I'm gonna wash this tonight, this apron. You forget how dirty it gets so quickly. Let's put these away. tidy up. Right, so if you've got your green bottle, put your shoulder on, like that, and I'm going a little bit thicker there, and then come with a clean finger. But if you notice, I'm curving it, and then got to try and match it up.
I know. What's the knack to do that?
It is. Sadly, it's practice. That's slightly.
Yeah. You said something about drawing in your head like a dome, and then putting the neck out, didn't you?
Yeah, I will often, with something like this, I'll think of it as a series of ellipses. If I was doing this in sort of sketching it in pencil or something first, I would do a series of ellipses and then join them all up to get the neck right. But again, it doesn't always work. Even then, you're relying on a lot of external factors like your own ability, which is quite hard to rely on a lot of the time. And then if I find a colour that is similar to this, slightly darker. Now, let me, oh, I'm covered in it again. Come down with that. Get you there. You can use these paper stumps. What's good about them is they're almost like a pencil in their own right once you start.
They've just got black on it.
Yeah, it's just all the dirt from all the other bits that I've been using. Because I'm fast running out of clean fingers. So if there was sort of a label on it, that's where it gets a little bit more confusing as well. So I won't bother with a label. I suppose I can. It's a white label. And it's got to come out further. So this will be the inside. You notice the swift interchange of fingers then from a clean one and a dirty one. So that would come round.
Oh, which is too
Let's get the white
I
pencil.
thought it was just going to go straight across the front like that.
Yeah. No, so we have one there, I think we want to pull around for us.
Clever, innit?
Yeah.
See that? If I'd have known I was going to put the label in, but these things expand and move around. I wouldn't have done it green there, but you can see that it will have to follow the curve of the bottle. Right, I've kept you for far too long now, but it gives you the idea anyway. Yeah, I have. I get carried away, don't I? But anyway, so glass in pastels is probably easier than anything else, because you've got the strong impact if you want it to on a dark background, but you have got the transparency if you wanted to on a slightly off-coloured background, or even a white-coloured background. You could do this with. So it's just a really interesting way. You could, if you needed to sort of emphasise the difference in the label, I could sort of like do it slightly a darker line there, and blend it out into that back line, so that makes it feel like it's coming out even more. But yeah, so there you go. So next month, oh, I've lost my little book. I don't know what I'm doing next month. Someone's half-inched me booklet. I can't tell you. Oh, Saturday, 7th of September. It's trees with a palette knife, or painting knife in acrylics. So that'll be quite fun. We're not into that one. So thank you for watching. I think it's the 7th of September.